really know many of the people that living out here. But we had about 50 people there. It was great. So I met this gentleman, very intelligent guy, kind of low-key, very nice. His first meeting, and I said, "Well, how long are you going to? Let's actually show of hands. How many here used to be or still are Democrats? It's fine. We're not going to give you a hard time. Okay. There's a lot of us. That's fine. I was a Democrat. So I asked this guy, how long have you been a Republican? I don't know why it occurred to me to ask him, and he said about 6 months. I said, oh. Okay. So we're having a very nice conversation. We had the meeting. You know, he schmoozed. The meeting is over. He walks up to me with his jaw down. He says, "Are these meetings always so therapeutic?" I said, "Actually, yeah." And I joked with Bruce that we have such a special secret sauce. You know, we don't know all the ingredients. But the truth is, you know, from the very beginning, it's been about fellowship. You're not alone. Education, fantastic speakers like Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, and networking. So that's what this has been about. And then I just have to brag a little bit. My 17-year-old daughter, Lila, who's here today, said something very brilliant last night. I said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know you told that." She said, "You know, Dad, in the 80s, Reagan had to fight the Soviet Union, and then President Bush had to fight the Islamic extremists, and Obama had ISIS, and who's Trump fighting? Liberals." And it's really true. I mean, we are in a civil war. If you don't think we're in a civil war, I would invite you to open your eyes a little bit more. We're in a civil war for the soul of this society, for Judeo-Christian values. So I love this book. Many of you have heard of Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson. This is called Dereliction of Duty. I have so many highlights in this book. I took out my highlight, and it's an important and fascinating book. And I highly encourage you, when you join the JRA today, order one of his books. Buzz told me he was going to bring books, but they sold out so fast he hasn't ordered for them. But this is an important book. Many people have not heard of something called the nuclear football, but all presidents must have the ability to access nuclear codes wherever they are, whenever they are, correct? The person in charge of that carries the codes at all times, is called nuclear football. And as you're reading the book, you can't interview for this job, you can't apply for this job, you have to be picked. And Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson was picked. And he was surprised because it wasn't on his agenda, and he served with honor and dignity and had a first-hand look inside the Clinton administration. So there's so much to be said. I'll just read his little blurb here. Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson, United States Air Force, served with distinction, saw tours of duty in Grenada, Somalia, Rwanda, Haiti, and Bosnia, and was selected to be one of 5 military aides in the Clinton White House. He carried the nuclear football in the top secret briefcase containing the launch code for America's nuclear program. So this is a big deal that you're about to hear. And I don't want to go over all these things in the book because you're going to read it yourself and you're going to hear it. But when you hear the things that went on inside the Clinton White House, and when you hear, listen, every president has flaws. Every president's going to make mistakes. Every president is going to do things you don't agree with. But when you talk about national security and keeping, what's the ultimate goal of government? To keep us safe, right? So the inside look that Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson gives this book is just superb and second to none. So I highly recommend to order the book, to read the book, share it, and please give a very warm welcome to Lieutenant Colonel Buzz Patterson.
Well, thank you guys very much. Great to be here. Thanks to Mitch for the invitation. So as Mitch covered, and I'll go back a little bit to tell you how my views, my political philosophy evolved. I came into the Air Force under President Ronald Reagan. I was a pilot, a combat pilot. I flew for 20 years ultimately, and actually flew into and out of 69 countries in my 20 years. I did a lot of work with Special Forces, the Navy SEALs, Delta Force, the Air Force PJs. And I really was, politically speaking, a blank slate. I was taught to be an Air Force officer and to salute smartly, and to whoever the commander-in-chief was, just to take the orders and do the best that I possibly could, and I did that for my entire career. In the fall of 1995, I was a squadron commander of the Air Force Squadron in Northern California, where I first met my now wife, Nicole. And an Air Force flying squadron is a lot like a college fraternity. You play hard, you work hard, you fight hard. And on this particular day, the phone rang in my office, and the voice on the phone said it was the White House calling about me coming in for the job. So I thought it was the guys down the hall. I hung up on the White House. True story. And then the phone rang again, and the guy says, "No, seriously, this is the White House. And I'm going to fly out. We're going to fly out." So it got my attention really quickly. That I needed to talk to this gentleman, and they wanted me to fly out to be president, to interview to be President Bill Clinton's military aide. Now I knew the job existed. I didn't really know much about it, and as Mitch pointed out, you can't apply for the job. So I was one of 6 that the White House had selected from across the entire Air Force to interview. So I flew out to Washington, D.C., and I interviewed for a 3-day process. It was a 3-day, the first day was a very intensive background check. I mean, literally they had my tax returns, they had my credit card receipts, they had talked to my best friend in elementary school and my college roommates, so they knew more about me than I knew about myself when I showed up there. So I got to that portion, interviewed all the way up the chain, just short of President Clinton. I actually was hired by Leon Panetta, who was the chief of staff of the White House at the time. And I remember him asking me at one point during the interview, he said, "Tell me why you want the job." And I said, "Well, sir, I'm not really sure I want the job. You guys invited me to come out. I'm loving living in Northern California and dating a beautiful California girl. You know, I'm not sure I want the job." He says, "Well, if we offer it to you, will you take it?" So I called my then girlfriend and said, "You know, I think I'm going to say no." And she said, "No, you can't say no to the White House. You got to take the job." So, and she's been right every day since, or so she believes. So I started in May of 1996. So this is the very beginning of the re-election campaign for President Bill Clinton. I started in May. I remember walking into the White House. It was a beautiful, crisp, clear spring day. And I was walking as an Air Force major, just really overcome with the opportunity and the privilege. Again, I didn't really have a whole lot of political leanings either way back in those days. But the 2 years at the Clinton White House certainly pushed me way right. And I'll share some of those experiences. So one of the first things, so there's been a military aid for the president ever since George Washington. Every president's had a military aid. During John F. Kennedy, during those years with the Cuban Missile Crisis, he realized that he needed to have the ability to launch nuclear weapons on a moment's notice or respond to nuclear weapons on a moment's notice. So he created this large black satchel, which is actually formally titled the President's Emergency Satchel. But military guys, being military guys, gave it a nickname and started calling it the nuclear football, because that's what we do. I mean, it was name things. So I was that guy from 1996 to 1998, and as such, I had an office in the White House and a bedroom in the White House. So for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 years, I was with the Clintons. Good and bad. It was a phenomenal experience. I traveled with him wherever he went, Air Force One, Marine One. I was always in the hotel room down the hall, or sometimes in palaces. In fact, I would call my wife from the palace somewhere and just gloat. So she was back at home with the dog, but I was living the life. So, but very early on in my time, we were in professional golf tournaments. So everywhere he went, I went. And we were at a professional golf tournament in Virginia. And concurrently, Saddam Hussein was attempting to drive his forces north and extinguish the Kurds in the northern part of Iraq. And we, the U.S., had promised that we would retaliate and protect the Kurds who've been our allies for a long time. So we had, in fact, they were my peers. Is that my time to stop? So we had my peers, pilots, and fighters and bombers ready to take off in the Middle East under the cover of darkness to retaliate and push back Saddam's Republican Guard. So as the military aid, when you're away from the White House, are also the call screeners. So if a phone call comes in addition to carrying the nuclear football, you're also taking the phone calls and making sure that the president wants to take that phone call or not. So on this occasion, again, with Saddam Hussein driving north and using chemical weapons on the Kurds, we had guys and girls in cockpits ready to go defend the Kurds. So I received 3 phone calls from Sandy Berger, who was a National Security Council advisor at the time. You may know him as Sandy Burglar, because he stole some documents from the archives and stuffed them in his pants and his socks. He got away with it, by the way. He can't make this stuff up. So, anyway, so Berger calls me and says, we've got this attack ready to happen. Please go talk to the president and get the go-ahead to launch the attack. So I approached President Clinton initially, and he said, I don't want to take the phone call right now. I want to watch the golf tournament. So I went back to Berger and said, he doesn't want to talk to you just yet. And I said, okay, I'll call you back in a little while. So Berger did call back in a little while. And said, okay, we've got a limited time of darkness over there where we've got to get these guys airborne, so please approach the president. So I went to see President Clinton again. He's doing an interview with CBS Sports' Jim Nance. He says, go away, I'll talk to Berger later. So I go back to Berger. Now, the president's mad at me and Berger's mad at me, and I'm kind of the guy in the middle. So the third time the phone call comes in, and I approach President Clinton, and Berger's saying, I need to go ahead. We've got to get this thing going or it's going to cancel. So I went to President Clinton. He says, no, I'm not going to take the phone call. I'll give him a call back on the motorcade going back to the White House. So bottom line is, President Clinton wanted to watch golf, and 100,000 Kurds were killed by Saddam Hussein's forces. And that was my initial insight into the man who we were about to re-elect as our commander-in-chief. On the second occasion, we were coming back. So I knew Monica Lewinsky. I knew from day one what was going on there. So did all the Secret Service agents. So my job, every quarter, every 3 months, I was required to brief President Clinton in the Oval Office and just see if he had any questions about military affairs, if he had any questions about how the nuclear process worked. And I was also there to confirm that he had the nuclear codes. So the nuclear football is actually this large black satchel. It weighs about 45 pounds. It has everything the president needs, no matter where he goes in the world, to communicate with the Pentagon, to make decisions, and I was that guy. So the president also carries a credit card size document on his either his pants pocket or his coat pocket, which is the actual nuclear codes. And military guys can give him the biscuit because you break into it and get to read the codes. And that's how the president could identify himself to the Pentagon and say, I have this ability, I am the commander-in-chief. There's going to be no doubt you guys can authenticate me and that I can make these decisions. So on the morning of the State of the Union address in 1998, I was the first person on President Clinton's schedule at 7 a.m. to walk in and see if he had any questions or just to give him a briefing on military affairs. And so I knew about Monica, and then I realized that morning that it hit the national press. So I remember walking into the Oval Office, has an outer office where the secretary sits. Benny Curry was the secretary back in those days. Then there's the formal Oval Office with the president's desk, and there's also a back office that has a hallway and a kitchenette area, and a couch and a TV where President Clinton would go back and watch football or basketball or whatever. So on this morning, I'm walking in at 7 o'clock in the morning. Benny Curry is not there yet, the secretary. And so I look at all these newspapers we lined up that morning for the president. The president would come in and just devour news. So we had the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New York Times, the Chicago Chronicle, Chicago Tribune. So I'm walking in and I look at the Washington Post headline and it says, "Sex Scandal Rocks White House." So I knew that the jig was up. the truth was out there, and the president had been caught. So I realized this was not going to be a great day to be working in the Clinton White House. Every day was a different challenge, and this is going to be one of the more challenging days. So I walk in, and the president's behind the desk with his head in his hands. You can tell he's been up all night long, just as wide as a ghost, with bloodshot eyes. And I realized that I really didn't want to be there that morning, confronting him. So I walk in and say, sir, I know it's been a long, this is a bad time for you to come back later to answer all the questions you have, but if you can just confirm and show me the nuclear codes and I'll get out of your hair. He says, well, I think they're upstairs somewhere. I don't really know where they are, but I'll retrieve them this afternoon and get them back to you. So I came back that afternoon, and he confessed that he had in fact lost the nuclear codes. It had never happened before, and it's never happened since. So I kind of pulsed him. I said, sir, well, how long has it been? I said, been days? He goes, possibly. I said, been weeks? Possibly. I said, months? He goes, I really can't recall. So here we have the President of the United States losing what was probably the most sensitive military document in our nation. And he can't remember how long it's been, or he didn't even bother to tell anybody about it. He didn't tell me. So we went possibly months without the ability to respond should that kind of catastrophe or tragedy happen. And the most important thing to him was that it did not make the press. Because he didn't want the double whammy. He didn't want Monica and losing the codes to be in the front page of the Washington Post. And I promised him that it would not make the press. And when I retired from the Air Force and wrote dereliction duty, I put it in there. So he lost the codes. And I think all of us should be aware of that, and that just how sensitive and critical that document is to our government. And I guarantee you, somewhere today, there's a military aide with President Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the codes, the military aide has the football, and that's how it works. It's a joint process. The military aide takes the president's input and communicates it to the Pentagon, National Military Command Center, and keys start turning and missiles start launching, and that's how the whole thing goes down. Obviously, a very sober and overwhelming responsibility in some aspects, but that's how the process works for us in the U.S. Anyway, we don't use laptops. We don't use anything that can be hacked. We use human beings, which I think is the way to do it. And I think after having done it for 2 years, that's the way we need to go forward. As a military, also, my responsibilities was to be in charge of all assets assigned to the White House, military assets. So Air Force One worked for me, Marine One worked for me, all the White House Communications Agency, which is about 2,500 people strong, all military members, they worked for me. So they did all the IT work, they did all the phone systems. And when we would go on the road, for example, when Clinton would travel, my last trip with him was a 9-country, 12-day Africa trip. And everywhere we went on that continent, every single city we stopped in required about 1,500 to 2,000 White House staff members to make those things happen. It's a huge logistical footprint. So every place in the U.S. would be about 500 to 750, but overseas would be about 1,500 to 2,000. So you can imagine the taxpayer expense to move the president around the world. In that Africa trip, we spent $74 million alone on just the transportation to get people over there, to get the limousines over there, Marine One over there, and get them back. So $74 million. So whenever time Trump travels, probably very similar. But what Clinton would do is he would say, so he couldn't use taxpayer money for private family events. He could only do that if he had an official event. So what he would do is he'd plan a 7 or 8 day trip and put one official event in there, which ended up paying for Air Force One, Marine One, all the motorcade stuff. So it came out of the White House budget, or the Air Force budget, is where most of that went, actually, or came from. So we're flying back from Washington, flying back in Europe. We've been over Europe, about a 7-day or 8-day trip, and so I was in Air Force One, President Clinton, and we're flying back. And typically, what we would do, we would land at Andrews Air Force Base, just outside of D.C., jump on Marine One, helicopter over the South Lawn on Marine One, which is what we did this night. And I took President Clinton upstairs and put him to bed. And I went down to my bedroom in the lower, downstairs of the East Wing, to put myself to bed, and the phone rang, and it was the Air Force presidential pilot, Mark Donlin, Colonel Mark Donlin, a good friend of mine. And so the way the Air Force One works is the pilots are officers in the Air Force, and everybody else in the back part of the airplane, the security, the communications people, the flight attendants are all Air Force enlisted. So Mark calls me and wakes me up around 1:30, and he's got a young female staff sergeant, flight attendant in front of him who's in tears. And I knew her, and I said, well, what's the problem, Mark? He said, well, President Clinton cornered her in a galley last night, sexually molested her. So I said, damn, that's going to be difficult to explain. So I said, what does she want? And he said, all she wants is an apology. She was young, she was married, she had two young children at home. She didn't want to be on the front page of the Washington Post. She just wanted to be promotable in the U.S. Air Force and just move on. So I've been shot at many times in combat over the years, but the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my Air Force career was walk down to the Oval Office the next morning and tell the Commander-in-Chief that he needed to apologize to a young staff sergeant in the Air Force. And it was difficult, and what was most alarming to me was his reaction. It was not one of denial. He just said, okay, make it happen. So 2 weeks later, we got him and her together on board Air Force One, and he made a very non-contrite apology. I'm sorry if I've hurt your feelings, was what he said that morning. And I'm thinking, as an Air Force officer, I'm thinking, of all the people, the sexual harassment issues in the Air Force and the rape in the military, all of those people, even for using off-color jokes, would be disciplined. Some often going to Fort Leavenworth, and here is the Commander-in-Chief getting away with that with a simple apology. And that's when I realized that, again, I was there just to serve the office, and that's when I realized that, that eventually this story needed to come out, that those of us who vote and our citizens in this country should demand more from a Commander-in-Chief. That they work for us, not vice versa. And talking about Monica Lewinsky in the White House and talking about this flight attendant on Air Force One, those are the people's airplanes and buildings, not the president or the first lady. Those belong to us, and that was one of the things that I found as an Air Force officer that really troubled me in terms of the lack of decorum and the lack of integrity. I tell people I got to know President Clinton really well, and he was actually a very gregarious, funny guy. I would go jogging with him in the morning. I would go to the golf course with him, and when he wasn't being presidential, he was just a lot of fun to be around. But I tell him also that he's one of those guys that if you would want to have over at your house for a barbecue, but keep him away from your wife and your daughter. He was always that kind of person. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, is not that kind of person. Hillary Clinton is equally as intelligent and driven, but nowhere near the politician that Bill is and was. And I think we saw that play out in 2016. She was not capable of making that connection with people. I don't believe anyway. So she was there during a lot of my time. I've got a lot of Hillary stories if you want to hear them. I'll tell you one or two. Pull my arm. So we're in Mexico City, and we're getting on Marine One to fly back to the Mexico City airport and to fly home Air Force One back to to Washington D.C. in the White House. And so Marine One gets airborne, and it's me and the President and the First Lady and a couple Secret Service agents and the doctor. So we lift off this landing zone, which was a secure place at this hotel out in this backyard area, and we lift off and start heading to the airport. And so at that point in time, all the Secret Service agents, they jump in vans and start hauling over to the airport to get on the same airplane with us, but they can't be on Marine One because it's so small. So we're about halfway to the airport. She realizes she's left her sunglasses back in the hotel room. So she wants to divert Marine One back to the landing zone and grab her sunglasses from the hotel. And so I had to tell her, well, ma'am, there's not going to be any security there when we get back. The agents are all gone. can't we just call back and ask somebody to send them to you, to mail them to you? So she was literally screwing herself into the ceiling of this helicopter, demanding to go back to the hotel. I mean, literally every single day there was something. There was a time when we were going to, I went on all the family vacations too, so we were going to St. Thomas, and we had been with, the Democrats had a thing in Hilton Head, South Carolina called Renaissance Weekend. And so we had been there for a couple of days, and this was New Year's Eve, 1998. And so we jumped on Air Force One, we're flying to St. Thomas to spend a week. If you guys remember that picture of them dancing on the beach, that was the same vacation, which was totally staged, by the way, but I'll get to that later, the picture. So we get to St. Thomas, we land on Air Force One, and I realize it's just, all hell's breaking loose on the airplane, and I realize Hillary is going back and forth. Apparently, Chelsea Clinton has left her textbooks, her high school textbooks, in the hotel room back in Hilton Head, and she is not going to let it go until Chelsea has them as quickly as possible. So I calmed her down finally, and I had to scramble an Air Force jet from Andrews to fly down to Hilton Head, South Carolina, to pick up the textbooks, and they were on Hillary's bedside table the next morning at all of our taxpayer expense. But Hillary was one of those people who just would not accept no for an answer. You know, he had a temper. Her temper was 10 times as volatile. You know, when I first got the job, my predecessor said, you know what? If you don't remember anything else about all these briefings you've had, just don't make her mad, because you'll never survive. And so for 2 years, I didn't make her mad, and I survived. But it was just, every day was a different challenge. One more Hillary story. We were going to a fundraising event at a hotel in Washington, D.C. In the motorcade. So my vehicle in the motorcade was right behind the limousine. So in my vehicle would have the chief of staff of the White House, the doctor, high-level political advisors. You know, it could be James Carville or George Stephanopoulos, something like that. And so we pull into the loading dock area behind this hotel. And to get onto the elevator to go upstairs to this hotel, and right behind the limousine, I see both of their heads going back and forth like they were just really having a, you know, just a throwdown. I realized it wasn't going to be another great day to be at the White House. So we get out of the motorcade and go into the elevator, and apparently Hillary just found out that she was going to have to testify in the Whitewater situation, and Janet Reno was going to force her to do that. She was not going to be able to get out of it. So Hillary's now blaming Bill because she has to testify in Whitewater. So they get in the elevator, and a typical elevator movement, we call them, would be the president, the first lady, myself, the doctor, and one agent. So we get in this elevator, go to the top floor, and she is letting him have it. I mean, letting him have it. You know, if you've ever been in trouble with your wife, you know what that feels like, right? So every profane word you've ever heard was coming out of her mouth. So I'm trying to bend myself over to the corner of this elevator so I don't suffer collateral damage from what's going on back and forth. But of course, he's just bobbing his head saying, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear, like all good husbands should. And we get to the top floor, so they're going back and forth. We get to the top floor, the elevator opens up of this big event, and like, you know, hundreds of people. They come out holding hands and waving, like nothing had occurred. And that's what they could do, and they could turn it around on a dime. So I retired from the Air Force in 2001. I was not a writer. I started getting phone calls from a lot of people I had worked with at the White House and saying, you need to tell the story about, you know, your time there. You really can't voice your personal opinions about politics while you're in the military. It's illegal. So once I was retired from the military, I could voice my opinions. So I decided to. So I wrote Dereliction of Duty, which I had never written anything, but it was a very passionate book for me, and I think it's very objective. I didn't want it to be a kiss and tell book. But before it even came out, here I am, just a pilot flying for Delta Airlines, writing this book, and it comes out, it's #1 on Amazon, #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. I'm on Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. I mean, just really like that, just this huge cascade of media and finance. Okay, so that's how I wrote Dereliction. I've written 3 books since then, 2 other bestsellers. Unfortunately, this is my 3rd talk this week, so we're sold out of books, which is a good thing. But we have book order forms, and I can get you books very, very quickly. I can probably have a shipment by next week, so if you want to buy some of the books, I'll personalize them for you and mail them to you if I get your addresses. You can say whatever you want to say in there, and I'll sign it for you. I've written 3, and I also 4 actually. And so I want to open it up because the Q&A part of this is a lot of fun, and I will be as brutally honest as I can be. And so let it rip. Yes, sir, in the back. Okay, get a microphone. Okay. Okay, sure.
I was just curious. My immediate thought. First of all, this is very fascinating. I appreciate your what you're sharing today. The wrath of the Clintons, and how has that affected your life? Have they come after you? Like, I'm just curious the aftermath of you telling these stories.
Yeah, well, when the first book came out, they really went after me hard, publicly for the most part. We did have some threats to my wife and my kids, but they were going after me. Hillary was a senator at that point in time. She threatened to take my Air Force retirement pension away, which she really couldn't do. And so I went right back at it and said, you know what, I'll debate either one of you or both of you at any point in time about the facts of this. This book's been vetted by the Pentagon and by my publisher and by outside attorneys. I'd be happy to play that game if you want. And they realized that we were just calling attention to the book sales, and it was counterproductive for them. So they got real quiet. You know, there have been a lot of people associated with the Clintons over the years that are not alive anymore. And I'm still walking around, so I feel pretty good about that. So yeah, they do things in very mysterious ways. I guarantee you, though, that if he walked in here right now, he would come over and shake my hand. If she walked in here right now, she would rip my heart out. So there's that dichotomy with the 2 of them. It's a good question, and yeah, we have very good security. Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for your time and for being here.
Yes.
Back to that credit card with the codes on it. So there has to be some kind of a fail-safe, right? That what would have happened if all of a sudden, you know, you need the card and I can't find it, I've misplaced it. There has to be something that would...
No, it had never happened before. So the Air Force, if you probably understand, was pretty incredulous that I was calling and telling that the president had lost the codes. So there was no backup card because they don't want anybody else to have access to it. So they had to jump to and recreate the codes. So, you know, we're not just talking about the codes that the president carries, because every single nuclear submarine, every single nuclear bomber, every single missile silo has to have the exact same codes. So you're talking about a huge undertaking to change those out in a matter of 20, we did it in 24 hours, which was really kind of phenomenal if you think about the work that went into that, the people that were involved in doing that. So yeah, there's only one football and one set of codes, and that's by design. And the only person that can get into the football is the military. Even the president can't access it. So I would get in that thing frequently and make sure I didn't mess up. And I knew what was exactly in there. But you can imagine the first few months on the job, I mean, I was just sleepless, making sure I knew exactly what was going on, you know, how to do this thing and not embarrass myself or the president.
Okay, so can you, I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy, but can you please talk about the allegedly long list of Clinton foes that are no longer alive?
Yeah, you know, when I first got to the White House, not being, again, I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy either, and I really wasn't, I wasn't a strong Republican or a Democrat, really. I was conservative in nature, but I will tell you that in looking at that list, and knowing the people that are on that list, there's far too much coincidence with what's happened in some of those people. There's a young lady on that list who was also a female intern at the White House, who also she had a night job working at Starbucks as the manager in Georgetown. So my wife and I lived in Georgetown. She lived there, I lived in the White House, but I would get home occasionally. And there was a young female intern, so as soon as Monica Lewinsky hit the press, this young female intern, days later, was found shot, execution style, in a Starbucks after they had closed for the night. And of all the people on that list, that to me just screams the Clinton machine. So, I don't have personal verification of any of these, but I just found that to be way too coincidental. That, he might have been having an affair with her too. Yes, sir.
I had a client who sold secondhand military aircraft parts to third world countries, and so he was very much involved with the State Department during the Clinton years. And there was a secretary, I believe his name is Brown,
Yeah, Ron Brown.
who mysteriously died
Right.
over in like the GNC or something like
Croatia.
that. And he told me that the man was murdered. And he said it was the Clinton people that did it, and the people that also, the aircraft controller, that handled that, and a couple other people that were directly involved with this man's demise were also had mysterious circumstantial accidents, unexplained kinds of things. And at the time I said, I can't believe it, but I'm a student of history, and I think, okay, this has been going on since we were swinging swords at each other, so chances are this could be happening to this very day. And listening to you talk about it, it kind of like resurrects this suspicion that I've had that Brown, in fact, was
Yeah, it was Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown, and I have a personal connection there too, because the pilot of that airplane was one of my best friends who died. And the official explanation for the crash was that they had not flown the approach correctly into Dubrovnik, Croatia. And I can tell you, I had just given Tim Schaefer was his name, had just given him a check ride. He was one of the best pilots I ever flew with. So for him to make that mistake, I just don't think there's not even a 1% chance that that's actually what happened. And they also apparently found a gunshot wound on Ron Brown's forehead. I can't confirm that. I can't confirm that they died going into Croatia, and that Tim Schaefer was the pilot and was an awesome pilot and a great dude. So I had to bring his body back to his wife. They didn't have any children, fortunately, but his wife was there. So there was a lot of those kind of things happening back in those days. And again, I don't have personal confirmation. All I can do, what I talk about in my books is 100% verifiable, objective experience. So I don't want anybody to, if you write a conservative book in today's world, if you have one fact out of place to a liberal, that cancels out the entire credibility of the book. So you've got to be really, really, really sure that you know what you're talking about, because you can sink yourself if you don't aren't 100% sure of what you're talking about. So all of my books, I try to make sure it's just my recollection, my opinion, and try to keep it as objective as possible.
I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Clinton Foundation, Haiti, human trafficking, and if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw it this morning, but Roger Stone, the former advisor to President Trump, had a SWAT team show up at his house at 3 o'clock in the morning. They had more firepower than we probably use against ISIS and Al-Qaeda to rouse this man out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning in his pajamas. So I don't know why that hasn't happened to Clinton associates with the foundation. The foundation, I think, is just a money laundering operation. The Clinton started making money back in the 90s, and it's all, in my opinion, it's always been about power and cash. And the foundation exists today because they want power and cash. And Haiti is a perfect example. They pretended that was going to be a huge humanitarian effort, and the people of Haiti, the Haitians, didn't get anything out of that to speak of. So in my mind, I think there's a lot of crimes to go around, but the fact that Clintons have not been held accountable, and the fact you talk about, the dossier, and the Steele dossier that was funded by the DNC, that started this whole Russian collusion thing. Fusion GPFs, the selling of uranium to Vladimir Putin when Hillary was Secretary of State. The fact that her husband got a sweetheart $500,000 speaking gig because of that, and none of that is going to stick. I just find that unimaginable. One of my thoughts is we can't have two levels of justice in this country. One for all of us, and then one for the Clintons. And I think the email scandal with Hillary, I had the highest security clearance in the land. I had the same clearance that President Clinton had. If I had done one of those, or two of those things, I would be in Fort Leavenworth right now breaking big rocks into little rocks, not 33,000. So the fact that she knew she was using a server, and she knew exactly what she was doing. I used to give her classified briefings to the White House. She knew exactly how that stuff worked. And for her to choose not to use State Department server, just shows she was going to run the process, and then to use hammers to break up cell phones and to bleach bit your hard drive. Come on, it just to me it's just so commonsensical that there be some kind of law enforcement action against them as well. But we'll see what happens. Comes out with the Mueller thing and where that goes. Hi.
So after seeing all this at a higher level, the highest possible level, how does that change you as a person? How do you, I'm sure it did change you, so how do you come out of that still positive or still engaged or still willing to fight the fight?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think probably, well, as a Christian, there's a lot of prayer involved. Daily. And no 2 days were ever the same. I mean, it was always a challenge. I mean, literally. And, working in that environment and just realizing, I remember walking in and realizing, okay, I'm working in the most important building in the world, for the most important person in the world. And as an Air Force officer, I was used to efficiency and integrity and character. And to find none of that at the White House was disappointing, to say the least. But what it did, I had to convince myself that I was there to serve the office and not the person. That's why I got through it. And I think what it did also, it woke me up to the fact that, what we as citizens should expect. And I was disappointed. And it wasn't just on the left, it was on the right too. I mean, there's the swamp is deep, and it's deep on both sides. I think it's deeper on the left, personally, but it's deep on both sides. And I think President Trump has realized that, I can't imagine another president that's had such significant headwinds for 2 years and still is able to get through what he's accomplished. He has, every single day is a battle for that guy. And I just can't imagine, 90% negative media coverage every single day. And he's resilient, and he's a New Yorker, and he doesn't play games, I don't think, so I'm proud of him. And I was actually, after I got out of the Air Force, I flew for 20 years in the Air Force, and I flew for Delta for 16 years. And I realized in 2016, with Hillary running again, that I could not sit on my hands in the cockpit and let a hair be our next commander in chief. So that's why I retired from Delta to do this again, to write and to speak. And I feel like in a small way I'm still serving my country. I miss the Air Force. I wouldn't change a day in my 20 years. And if I had known what I know now about 9/11, I wouldn't have retired. But now this is my way of giving back. And I think there are stories that need to be told and views that need to be expressed, especially for our military members. Okay, so again, if you're in the military, you cannot promote a personal opinion, a political opinion. It's against the law. So our military needs a vote. We have got 2.1 million people in the military today, and they cannot speak for us. But those of us who've been there can. I think you're seeing more and more military members come forward, like me, to say, okay, this is what really matters. This is what really went down. And actually, my life changed, I think, on 9/11. I left the White House in '98. We had 8 chances in my 2 years to either capture or kill Bin Laden. And every single time, President Clinton said no. So in 9/11, I'm a Delta Airlines pilot flying to New York. So I'm walking out of our living room, and I see the aftermath of the first airplane hit. And I remember Katie Couric saying it was possibly a small aircraft that had lost its way. There was no way. It was a beautiful, clear day in New York. So as I watched the second airplane hit. And I thought, you know what? Bill Clinton. We had a chance to do this, to circumvent this, and he didn't act. And that's when I vowed to myself to start talking about what I knew about his entire 8 years, especially the two years I was there, and especially the fact that we were tracking Bin Laden the entire time. It had chances. and we chose not to do anything. And that's why the book's called Dereliction of Duty. He was derelict in his duties as our commander-in-chief. And it was kind of a clarion call for all of us to understand when we go to the polls and we vote. The most important responsibility or duty I think our president has is to protect us as citizens. And if he or she is incapable or incompetent, it shouldn't be elected. So I think it's important for you all to hear from a guy that was in the foxhole with him that we failed with him for sure. I think we failed in the 8 years of Obama too. So look at the mess that the military was left of Obama. And Trump's trying to fix that. You can't fix the military overnight. It's going to take probably 4 to 6 years at a minimum for us to get back to where we were before Obama. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion on the Seth Ridge killing?
I don't know much about it. You know, he was killed walking down the street in D.C. and they didn't rob him or anything, they just shot him. He was a DNC. He is rumored to be the person that was the DNC that gave the WikiLeaks information to WikiLeaks. And again, it would fit the profile of what the Clintons would do. I mean, the Clintons, for whatever you think about them, good or bad, and I'll tell you that in some ways, seeing their political machine up close and personal is very, very impressive. I mean, they had a group of people that surround them, loyalists, sycophants, whichever you want to call them, that will literally do anything for them. And they're the same people that go all the way back to Little Rock in most cases. They have created a dynamic machine that will just literally control the narrative on just about anything. So I don't know much more than that. I think it's probably, you know, I don't know, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that they had him whacked. Yes, sir.
With all the...
I'm sorry.
Hi. Well, there's a guy who wrote a book called Clinton Cash. You mentioned
Yes.
the money and uranium.
Peter Schweitzer.
And he outlined everything.
Right.
I mean, everything. He had sources for everything. And everybody else just acted like, I don't know, nothing. Like it was a crazy act or something. And nobody's going to go after them because they don't want to die. They don't want to, I mean, you know, they kill for less. They murder for less.
Yeah, Peter Schweitzer is the author. It's a great book. He read it, Clinton Cash, and he literally connects all the dots with the foundation, and it really is unbelievable. My first experience there, you may or may not remember this, but I thought the Republicans messed up during the Clinton years by going after the Monica Lewinsky situation. In my mind, the big crime was when Bill Clinton approved the sale of satellite missile technology to China in exchange for campaign fundraising. That is the big crime to me. That's why China today is a huge nuclear threat to us. So that happened in 95, 96. So we got hung up on Monica, and we should have been going after the money in China. And it was the L'Oreal Corporation was what we allowed them to do business with China and basically give them our secrets. So they're capable of doing that kind of stuff.
Based on all of the circumstances that occurred with Whitewater back in the early to mid 90s, with people disappearing and being found dead, I know you were concerned, but the question becomes, after you write this book, aren't you concerned about your life, the life of your family, etc.?
Yes. When the book first came out, we lived in Atlanta, Georgia, on a cul-de-sac with a lot of former Marines, and they liked the book too. So they told me they had my back, and they essentially did. And I think the book became successful enough that the Clintons realized maybe that they really couldn't get away with something like that. I mean, again, we had to get the FBI involved early on with some of the threats that were making on my wife and my children. But that all died out very quickly. And so I still look over my shoulder a lot. And so it's, you got to do what you got to do. I remember at one point I was not going to write the book, and I remember talking to one of my mentors in the Air Force, a retired general. And he says, well, he said, you can be loyal to the Clintons and you can be loyal to your country. That's the right call. So I did the book. And I think that was, it's been out for 15 years, it's still selling. That's why we're sold out. I mean, it's been a remarkable thing for, for something that I just wanted to put out there. In the very beginning, I just wanted to put it out there to get it off my chest. I didn't think it was going to be a blockbuster New York Times bestseller. I really didn't. I had never written anything other than Air Force flying manuals, which are dry as hell, and turn left and right. So yeah, I still worry about that kind of stuff. We have a nice security system at home, but I tell my kids, always vigilant. This is
two quick questions. Basically, one is, how do you answer those people that will say, oh, what you discussed is, nothing really, or it's not really true, because I'm sure, especially with the media the way it is, and it has been for a while,
right.
They would try to excuse, say this is not real, and just write you off. That's
sure.
one thing. And the other thing is to bring it full circle to today's time, with your years' experience at the White House and what you know and what you saw, and just in general, and how you know it works there. You sort of brought it up a little bit, but how do you see what's going on in today's White House, and what do you feel is the reality versus the fantasy, so to speak?
Yeah, two really good questions. The first question, I would say that I wrote the book based on my experiences and my observations. I kept a journal, not to write a book, I kept the journal because it was such a blur for 2 years. I mean, literally, I didn't sleep for 2 years. We were either on an airplane, on a helicopter, or some kind of event somewhere. So I kept the journal so I could remember what I had done, where I had been in those 2 years. So I just do a lot of speaking on college campuses, and invariably there'll be a professor there that will say, that didn't happen, or that can't be true. And I said, well, I was there and you weren't. And I wrote about it, and and the Clintons they have never said a single thing in that book is untrue. And I know they're attack dogs, and they would go after anything in that book that was untrue, and they have chosen not to 15 years later. So, and secondly, I'm sure that Sean White House is chaotic. He's not a politician. Let's just be honest. That's why I voted for him. I wanted an outsider to come in and break stuff up, because it's broken. And I think it's broken on both sides. You can see what's happening. The fact that we can't get a budget passed to keep our government open is ridiculous. I saw today that the congressional approval rating is 13%. Probably get a higher percentage from, Bill Clinton. But I think that I have friends working in the White House. I actually went to college with Steve Bannon. So I got involved in the Trump campaign back in 2016 because he pulled me in to be a surrogate in California. The people I know there are stand-up people. Sarah Sanders is a rock star. The stuff that she takes on a daily basis from those people. This is the true statement. The toughest job in that building is being the press secretary. Absolute toughest job. And people like Jim Acosta and some of those other idiots that go after her every single day. Can't imagine. And I think I know a lot of folks that work there. They love him. He listens to people. He's a lot more compassionate than it comes across on TV and through our media. I really, really pray that he's our president after 2020. Okay. Hey.
So I have a really simple question. When my dad first told me what your job was, my first question was, how did you sleep knowing that you were responsible for something like that?
It took me a while to get comfortable with that. It's a good question. And it took me, when I first arrived there, I swore to myself I was not going to do anything to get him hurt or embarrassed. So I set a pretty low bar there. Anything other than that was going to be cake. So for the first several weeks, if not months, the responsibility, if you think about the fact that the bag you're carrying could result in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and just like that, it's very sobering. But again, faith, and making sure I knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing. My relationship with him, after kind of an awkward couple of month phase, I got to be fairly close with him, as close as he would allow me to be. And that's the other thing, it's the military age of Clintons. You were part of the inner circle, but you were not all the way. So I would go jogging with him and play golf with him, but there was always just that hand keeping me, because I was a military guy, and it was very weird for them, because they weren't real military fans. So really good question. I got through it, but I tell you what, I left, it's a 2-year assignment, I left exactly at the 2-year point, because I just wanted to get out of there and take a shower. And get all that stuff off of it. So thank you so much, guys, you've been great.
So, is that unique and special? You know, I didn't mention it before, buy the book. It's awesome, it's really incredible. All the things I have highlighted what Buzz talked about. It was really great. I'm like, yep, I remember that, yep, I remember that. So as a token of appreciation, we have a JRA lapel pin for you. And thank you so much, Buzz, it was fantastic. His wife Nicole is out there in case you want to sign up for the books. And I'm going to turn it over to Bruce. Thank you.
God bless you guys.